Oh, did you ever modify last week's show notes? Marco and I had a bet going to see when you would.
Oh, I didn't even look at them.
You didn't.
What did you have in there?
Nothing, Dad.
Don't look.
Don't look, Dad. Don't look, Dad. It's fine, Dad.
Knew about the dollar signs, pre-show, Mac. Is it the title? Because it's all like small caps on the website, so I can't tell if that title is
No.
Do you still have your dollar signs in your menu bar, Casey, or have you fixed that?
No, I fixed it during recording.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I'm looking at it. You're going to think I'm going to complain about the emoji FOMO thing?
No. Yeah, you've already skipped over it then.
Oh, I don't know. What am I looking at? Tell me.
Sonos and Google sitting in a tree. Anchor and Amazon. KISSING.
You messed it up by putting the word R in there. R is not in the nursery rhyme.
Oh, that is true.
That's all I complain about. I have no problem with you doing a cute thing in the show notes. I have a problem with you not knowing how the KISSING song goes. It would be Sonos and Google sitting in a tree, ellipsis. Next line would be KISSING. You wouldn't say Anchor and Amazon. Like, have you not? You messed it up.
But it was two different topics. I was trying to wrestle it in.
I know. Well, you blew it. You blew it.
I'm speaking to you two fine gentlemen tonight from the peaks of High Sierra.
As am I, actually, but for a bad reason.
Oh, that's surprising. Yeah, well...
Oh, yeah. Actually, I forgot to put that in the... That should be a topic today.
I just put it in, and I now have moved it up to the top. But we can't get there yet because we have to do some follow-up. So since we already are enticing the listeners, let's just dive right in. John, can you tell me about Sky platform exclusivity, if you please?
Speculated on the last show that Sky's exclusivity to the Apple TV would be just like every other exclusive in the gaming world, a timed exclusive, and that is actually confirmed on that game company's website. It says arriving first on iPhone, iPad, and Apple TV. Additional platforms to follow. No time window given, but we'll see how that goes. So I might just be able to hold out until it comes out on, PS4 or whatever.
And tell me about your chair, please.
So I have my chair, my ridiculously expensive Herman Miller chair that I've been sitting on since the last show where we talked about it, or maybe 2 shows ago, I forget. But I just wanted to give an update on how that's going. So I did take off both of the arms. I had to order another Torx wrench because the one that I had couldn't fit in the little space or whatever. But it's always good to have more Allen keys and Torx wrenches, in metric and standard and all sorts of sizes. Although Torx, it just comes in its own little sizes. T3 is what I needed. Anyway, arms are off. T3 or T30? I forget. Anyway, one of those things.
I don't think it matters.
It matters if you want to take the arms off your chair. I had a set of Torx wrench things, but they didn't fit. And they don't make it. A couple of the screws are hard to get at because the levers that come out that adjust the seat are kind of in the way. But it's not that bad. Just I Amazon ordered some. So I've been sitting on that chair for a while, and I have just some follow-up impressions of it. I like it. It takes a little bit of getting used to because it doesn't feel like regular chairs, but I think I've settled into it pretty well. 2 things about it have annoyed me so far. One, there is an adjustment on it to make the seat length, like basically from the back to the front of the seat to make it longer, which is great for people with long legs like me, because you're not supposed to have like half your leg hanging off the front of the thing. So you can make the seat longer. I wish more cars had this. Some of them do. Some cars actually have this adjustment to sort of support your legs more, more down towards your knee. They say you're supposed to have 2 inches between the back of your knee or the back of your calf or whatever, and then the seat front. So the Herman Miller body has 2 big handles that you can grab and slide out the front part of the chair, which I do. But unless you are in a situation where you're sharing your chair with somebody else and constantly switching back and forth, this, like many of the adjustments on chairs, is something that you'll do once or twice in the beginning when you're getting used to the chair, and you'll eventually decide what adjustment setting is right for me. There's only a few choices there. There's not like infinite adjustability. And you find how the seat is comfortable for you, and you leave it there. But for the entire time you own this chair, these 2 Mickey Mouse ears, coffee cup mug handles are going to be sticking out the front of your chair. And every time I get into and out of my chair, somehow I bump into those things. They're like ears. They're like useless ears, fossilized ears poking out of the front of the chair. And I don't like that. Second thing is, since I have it extended almost as far as it will go, I think maybe I do have it as far as it will go for my long legs, there's like a little bit of a creakiness in the front of the chair as that little telescoping thing kind of flexes in its plastic grooves. Maybe that squeak will go away over time. Maybe it won't, but it's not a sound and a feeling that matches up with the price of this chair. So I don't really like that. And then the final thing, there's a lot of stuff under this chair for all of the spring-loaded like mechanisms that handle the thing where you lean back in the chair, and some of it probably also handles like the back tension, and then there's the gas cylinder thing for the height of the chair. That giant box of works that's basically under your butt takes up a surprising amount of room. And you say, who cares about that room? Nothing's going on under your chair, right? Well, apparently, I'm someone who occasionally crosses his legs and shoves both his feet underneath the bottom of the seat, resting them on the top of the little leg thingies. And I didn't know I did this as much as I do until my heels started hitting that giant box that I'm now sitting on. And I suppose I could get used to it, but I'm still hitting my heels in that box a surprising amount of time. I'm just like, I kind of wish that wasn't there. I kind of wish I had that free space to shove my feet into again. So that's my update on the Embody. Mostly I like it. I think I'm definitely going to keep it. But I'm sitting right now on the Steelcase gesture chair, which just arrived today. This still has arms on it, and they're going to be much more difficult to take off. I'm already puzzling over how I'm going to manage this. But for now, the arms are on, and I'm sitting on it. It definitely feels different than the Embody. But it has right away, its adjustment for the length of the seat is to move the entire seat forward. So it's all just one unit. There's no extendy bit. It has less creaky bits on it, and there's more room underneath it for me to cross my legs. But it definitely feels different than the Embody. It feels more like a normal chair, and I'm not sure if I like it as much as the Embody. But I'm just sitting in it for 5 minutes here. So probably next show I'll have a more longer-term update on the comparison of these two chairs. And I better hurry up because I've got like 30 days for both of them to decide whether I want my bazillion dollars back for these chairs.
So last episode, I was lamenting the fact that if you have an issue with your Google Pixel phone, you can get online and you can tell Google, hey, I've got an issue, and they'll overnight you a box with a replacement Pixel, and then you put your broken Pixel into the box and ship it back to them. And I thought, man, that would be really awesome to be able to do that with Apple. I wish that was a thing. And a handful of people wrote in to say it is a thing. So John Tooker pointed me to Apple Care Plus Express Replacement Service, which is if you have Apple Care Plus, a way that you can basically do the exact same thing. They ship you a box, and then you put your thing in the box that the new thing came in, etc. There's a joke here from Saturday Night Live that I'm trying to avoid. Anyway, Prem wrote in to say, I've done this, and here's what it looks like. And so we'll put a link to that in the show notes, and it's exactly what you would expect to see. So turns out this is an option. I just had no idea, which if you live far away from an Apple store, which most of the country probably does, that's pretty awesome. And then additionally via Prem, they pointed me to a K-Base article, hi Stephen, entitled How to Use Your Apple Watch Without Your iPhone Nearby. And it says a handful of things in there, but one of the things it says is to receive SMS, MMS, or push notifications from third-party apps on your Apple Watch Series 3 GPS and cellular, your paired iPhone must be powered on and connected to Wi-Fi or cellular, but it doesn't need to be nearby. So that kind of hints to me that that Apple is proxying push notifications. I have since heard reports that WhatsApp, I believe that's what the app was. I know that is an app. I just can't remember what people were citing, but a handful of people cited something, and I think it was WhatsApp, as not having an Apple Watch app at all, yet people receiving push notifications via cellular. Additionally, the developers of Do actually wrote us to say, Do uses local notifications. I think the scheduled notifications were copied from the iPhone to the watch the last time they talked. And I think one of us had theorized that may be the case. But it sure sounds like, and I have since gotten tacit confirmation from a couple of little birdies, that Apple is indeed proxying push notifications via, I guess, iCloud or something in order for your watch, your cellular watch, to receive push notifications, even if it's not in range. I have had several people explain to me that I'm a moron and that actually Bluetooth works very far, and I'm a moron that the watch was on Wi-Fi, but I assure you, I checked to see what the watch says it was on, and it said it was on cellular at the time. So, yes, I'm aware that the watch does work on Bluetooth, and Bluetooth works further away than one would expect. I understand it works on Wi-Fi. I don't know why it wasn't on Wi-Fi in this particular instance, but the watch said it was on cellular, and I am inclined to believe the watch. So, in summary, it sure does sound like that Apple is proxying iPhone push notifications, which is pretty cool.
We are sponsored this week by Away. For $20 off your suitcase, visit awaytravel.com/ATP and use promo code ATP during checkout. Away makes high-quality, thoughtfully designed luggage for the modern age. They use high-quality materials while offering much lower prices compared to other brands by cutting out middlemen and selling directly to you. They now offer 9 colors and 4 sizes, from carry-ons all the way up to giant suitcases for long stays. All their suitcases are made with premium German polycarbonate, unrivaled in strength and impact resistance, and very lightweight. They have a patent-pending compression system inside, which really helps for overpackers. They have 4 spinning wheels that guarantee a smooth ride and easy maneuverability. All of them have TSA-approved combination locks, and they have removable, washable laundry bags to help keep your dirty clothes separate from your clean. And the carry-on sizes are also able to charge cell phones, tablets, and anything else powered by a USB cable because they have built-in batteries. A single charge of the built-in battery on the Away carry-on will charge your iPhone 5 times. All of this is protected by a lifetime warranty. If anything breaks, they will replace or fix it for life. You can get all this for yourself with a 100-day trial. Get an Away suitcase. You can live with it. You can even travel with it, obviously, because that's how you try out a suitcase, right? Travel with it for 100 days, and if you decide it is not right for you, you can return it for a full refund with no questions asked. Check it out today. You can get free shipping on any Away order within the lower 48 states of the U.S., and they even have a showroom in New York City if you want to see them in person. So check it out today at awaytravel.com/ATP, and you will get $20 off your suitcase. Use promo code ATP during checkout. Once again, awaytravel.com/ATP, and use promo code ATP for $20 off your suitcase. Thank you so much to Away for sponsoring our show.
Moving on to Ask ATP. Jason Townsend writes in, for those who run Plex on a Mac, how do you run it with no logged in user? And I can speak for myself and say, I don't. It is running as part of my user that I'm using right now on this very Mac. And this user is pretty much always logged in, and that's okay for me. It may not be okay for you, listener, but it's okay for me.
I was hoping you had an answer to this. That's why I put it in there. I'm like, oh, Casey probably knows how to do this because I do the ssame thing. It's running as my wife's user, and she's always logged in. Now, here's the thing. You have to be logged in, but you don't have to be the frontmost user. So if one of my kids comes up and is doing their homework on their account on the same computer, as long as my wife is logged in the background, Plex still works and runs. So you don't have to leave their account as the frontmost. But if there's a way to run it without you being logged in, like cron it and run it as, some other user with no GUI or whatever, I haven't even tried to do it, but maybe have you tried anything, Casey, or are you just like, no. Well, I'm just always logged in, so I have no need for this?
Exactly right. I have no need for it.
Yeah, so we're not going to say that it can't be done, just that neither of us has tried to do it. Marco, I assume the same?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the idea of running it like without having a logged in user, basically like as root, never even occurred to me because that's not how I would think to run things that are on a Mac in a server role. Like, even though I know there are things that Macs can do as a server with no user, like, the built-in Apache server and stuff like that, many of the things that you would run a Mac server for require there to be some kind of application in user space running to serve those tasks. So the idea of running a Mac in some kind of server role without a logged-in user has never even occurred to me to even think about.
Yeah, I know that was not the answer that you were looking for, Jason, and I'm sorry for that, but that is the answer for us. And if you happen to know how to do this, I would be curious to hear. It's not really solving a need that I have, but I'd be curious to hear. So do write in and let us know, and Jason as well. Tom Myers asks, could you guys help explain why a massively multi-core ARM Mac Pro... Oh, never mind. We don't have to talk about this. Moving on. No, just kidding.
This is what you get for not picking the questions.
I actually meant to earlier today, and I got sidetracked at work and never did. And actually, to be honest, I'm curious to hear your answer to this, John. So let me reread it. Could you guys help explain why a massively multi-core ARM Mac Pro wouldn't be viable? A 64-core, etc., A11X architecture, for example.
So it would be viable, but we've talked about this on the show before. There's a couple of aspects to this. So we all know that Apple makes really fast system-on-a-chips for their phones, and then they make even faster ones that they use in their iPads. And the number of cores on them has been increasing from 1, and now they're up to 4 in the phone, right? Is it 4? I forget.
With the 8 series, it's now 6.
6. You got the 4 slow ones and the 2 fast ones. Yeah. Anyway, that's a lot of cores. That's more than they had before. But as we discussed last time this came up, to make something that doesn't, that's not like a little system on a chip that takes iPad power, but instead takes 150 watts or something like a Xeon class CPU. That's a very different kind of design. You can't say, well, because we've made a chip for the iPad that's faster than all of our laptops, right? Or all faster than our cheap laptops. We've basically done all the work to make the Xeon class thing, and you haven't. There's a lot more that goes into making a Xeon class CPU than just saying, oh, we have a core and we'll just multiply it out. It's not like a GPU where you just, take the execution units and just add more of them, and even that gets more complicated. There's tons of things having to do with I/O and PCI Express lanes and figuring out the whole Thunderbolt thing and the various chipsets, not to mention all the multiple cores and the cache coherency and the ECC RAM and all sorts of other things that, it's not to say that they couldn't do it. I'm sure they would do an excellent job. It's just to say that by having iPad and phone chips, they haven't done all the work. So if they wanted to make one, they could, but it's a lot of additional work. And the question we've always had is it worthwhile for Apple to do all of that additional work to essentially compete with Xeons for a line of computers that they sell very, very few of compared to anything else? So maybe that's the answer to the viability question. Technically viable, sure, but Apple would have to do a ton of work. Financially viable, can Apple justify that ton of work? Maybe they will eventually, because, as people have been benchmarking the new iPhone 8 and 8 Plus against Mac laptops, like modern Mac laptops that you can buy right now that are not like last year's models, and seeing how fast the system on a chip is, the case for ARM-powered Mac laptops is getting stronger and stronger. But the case for ARM-powered Mac Pros, if Apple started this project 4 years ago and has a Xeon-class ARM CPU waiting in the wings for like next year's Mac Pro, then fine. But if they haven't started that project now, you're not going to see one of these for a long time. It would cost a lot of money. It would take a lot of time. And honestly, I feel like Intel does pretty well in the high end, perhaps better than they do in the low end and the laptop space. So best case scenario, Apple makes something that is some single to double digit percentage faster than Intel. And you don't really get a lot of extra points for doing it with less power in a Xeon class thing, because, you're not running them off battery. Like the whole point of these machines is they're plugged into the wall, and it's like a huge amount of power going into them. To power everything, the RAM, all, the GPU, the separate GPU, the multiple GPUs and stuff like that. So, I think it's viable, but it may not be financially the best thing for Apple to do, and they have a lot of work to do.
I'm still super curious to see if to one day discover if we'll ever see a ARM-based MacBook Pro. Certainly, Marco has thoughts about MacBook Pros these days.
I didn't actually put that in as a topic, but we can talk about that if we want. But just before we leave this, I would be super excited to see. I think everybody would be. Every computer nerd would be like, someone wants to compete with high-end CPUs with Intel. That would be great. And like I said, Apple has shown that it's got really good talent to make. It's just a question of will. Does Apple want to make a chip like this? Because if they want to, I bet they could do a really good job, and it would be super cool. But it still strikes me as one of those fantasies, like, the Halo car kind of fantasy of like, Apple's going to make everything its own, and it's going to make a special computer that's faster than anybody else's because they're going to make their own CPU. And that would be super cool, but I just feel like it's still a pipe dream. Let's baby steps. Let's get a new Mac Pro sometime this century, and then we'll think about putting a 64-core ARM chip in it.
Richard Ernie writes in and asks a disturbingly reasonable question. And that question is, how many iMac Pros do you think Marco will buy before the launch of the Mac Pro?
I have an answer.
I also have an answer.
Okay. What do you guys think the answer will be?
I feel like the answer should be 1, because you will presumably buy the most expensive and most ridiculous iMac Pro you possibly can in the way only Marco can do, and that should be it. But I fear you will somehow talk yourself into, oh, this one thing I really don't need and or will make it worse. So like as an example, the dual graphics card MacBook Pros. I know there won't be a direct equivalent of that in the iMac Pro, but something along those lines. Well, I understand that the dual graphics card MacBook Pros are hypothetically better, but they're better in ways that don't matter to me, so I won't get the maxed out top-of-the-line MacBook Pro. Instead, I'll get a different MacBook Pro. So that is the one, I don't know, like wild card. If you somehow convince yourself that, oh, maybe I don't need the cranked to 11 version of the iMac Pro, then I could see you in for two. Because the first one will be the oh, I don't need everything, and then you'll decide, oh, that was a terrible mistake, I need everything, and then you'll get the one you should have gotten in the first place. John.
So you're overthinking it, but also underthinking it. My answer to this is
what does that mean?
Well, you'll see in a second. So he's overthinking it because he's got his answer of one, but then he's hedging, and what about two, blah, blah, but you're also underthinking it, and you're forgetting a very important factor. When I read this question, I had an immediate answer, and the answer is he will buy two before the launch of the Mac Pro. Why will he buy two? Because he'll get one because he's impatient and he'll buy one for Tiff. That's the answer.
I did not even think about that.
So
You're right.
he's
right.
going to buy two iMac Pros before the Mac Pro.
You're right. That is the answer. So Marco, not that it matters because you're going to be wrong, but what do you think the answer is?
I think the answer is most likely to be 1, but might be 0.
Oh, I call foul right now. Somebody mark this date down.
I said most likely 1.
All right, go ahead. Let him explain.
Okay. So in John way, I'll tell you that you're both right and wrong, and John is both wrong and right. So the generous plan that would have me buying one is I buy one for myself. When the Mac Pro comes out, I give it to Tiff and I get myself a Mac Pro. The case for maybe being 0, it basically leads into the first topic that we have on this list, which is labeled in the chat, why is Marco on his MacBook Pro? And the reason why is because my iMac has some issues that I wanted to get repaired in the 8 days left in the warranty.
Screen spiders.
Good call.
One of those is that the screen has image retention. That is probably the biggest issue. The issue that, like, for long-term value and the ability to sell it for a reasonable price when I'm done with it, I want to get that fixed. Because the screen has a screen-only issue, I am currently without my main desktop computer for probably a week, maybe a little bit less if I'm lucky. And that is horrible. Like, it's incredibly disruptive. So I have... Let me show you my desktop setup here. I'll paste the link in the chat. So the picture I've just shown you is what I am podcasting on tonight.
Oh, my word.
Are you the mayor of Dongletown as well? I got to wait for the picture to come in.
This is tremendous.
It's like the old times. You need some soda cans.
I'm currently very much not satisfied with owning an iMac as my primary computer because as much as I miss the crap out of it, I really wish it was separate from the screen. Because then, if something went wrong with the screen, I could just get the screen fixed. If something went wrong with the Mac Pro, I could plug in a laptop to the screen on my desk and use that as a stand-in desktop while I got the desktop serviced.
But you're not enough of a hardware hoarder to have extra screens around. So say it was separate and you just had to get the screen repaired. You'd have a headless computer with no screen, and you'd still have to use your laptop because what are you going to hook up the body of your computer to?
Well, I could get another screen. Like I could basically
like overnight another screen. I forgot. Buying solves everything. Buying solves all problems.
I can order a new screen, get the other one fixed, and that's harder to do when it's an iMac. Like I'm not going to buy a whole new iMac to use for a week and then return it or sell it or anything.
But you'd buy a new 5K monitor for $1,000, no problem.
Maybe. If I'm losing a week of productivity here using my laptop as my only computer, and like trying to do iOS development on this. It's crazy.
Whoa. You're not losing a week. You're not losing a week. You are perfectly capable of being productive. You're too fussy to want to do it.
No, I am doing it. Like I am powering through and doing it,
yeah,
but it
exactly,
sucks.
Exactly.
And it's at substantial reduction of productivity to have
to
lose 8 inches of screen space of screen diagonal too for a while. So it's not great. At times like this, I really make a mental note to say, just buy the desktop next time. Just buy the Mac Pro next time. So I really don't like the idea of spending a lot of money on an iMac Pro that might potentially still have, that would still have this limitation of like, if anything goes wrong with it, I lose everything for the time it takes to get it serviced. Also, this iMac is only 3 years old, minus 8 days. And it already has like a few little annoying things about it. And I can already see like, I might not want to use this after the Mac Pro comes out. And I'm assuming for this discussion that the Mac Pro is probably coming out next summer. And so if the Mac Pro comes out way later than that, like if it ends up being 2019 or next winter, like, this might change things. But I might actually just get 0 iMac Pros, because the iMac Pro concerns me in the sense that it's really hard to get an iMac to function well and be useful for 10 years. John's Mac Pro is actually doing that. And you're going to pay the price of John's Mac Pro for an iMac Pro. You're going to pay the Xeon tax. You're going to pay the Pro tax. You are going to pay, like, what did they say? The base price was $5,000?
$5,000, but you forget how cheap this was. Even accounting for inflation, 10 years ago, this was only like $2,300. This was back when the Mac Pros were incredibly cheap for what you got.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even with inflation, you're coming out, I think, pretty far ahead with that. And so the Mac Pro, to me, like, you do pay a lot for it, but they last pretty much indefinitely. Like they will last as long as you need them to last. And if something does go wrong with them, you have a much better chance of being able to practically and economically service it yourself down the road when it's out of warranty, etc. And so the lifespan of a Mac Pro tends to be longer than the lifespan of an iMac. And I'm not considering the cylinder ones when I'm saying this.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You're thinking of the old Mac Pros. That's last decade thinking. Like, okay, so that was the case. But the most recent Mac Pro Apple has made, none of those things are true about. It was unreliable from the start. It wasn't easy to repair yourself, and people aren't using them well for 10 years. So I think you kind of have to take a wait and see. And that maybe you won't have a choice of something that is big, reliable, and easy to repair, right? Maybe that won't be one of your options. Your option instead will be, a faster, hopefully quieter, and more powerful separate screen thing, but that is just as unreliable as any of the more recent Apple hardware is, and just as weird and flaky. And the first generation has strange problems and all that stuff. I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but like we're all kind of thinking like, oh, the new Mac Pros will be like the old ones, and the cylinder was an aberration. And I think that's still an open question.
Yeah, you're totally right. It is, and I think the cylinder has taught them some lessons. I would not expect a return to a giant tower, but I would hope that it's maybe kind of something in the middle there, like something between a sealed up cylinder that you can do nothing to and some kind of interchangeable parts, thing. Maybe whether it's a tower or not.
Perhaps a magnesium cube.
Yeah, right. And so I'm not sure I want to commit to an iMac. Now, if the Mac Pro was totally dead and they said, okay, we're launching the iMac Pro, the Mac Pro is discontinued, we're never going to make one again, we're just doing the iMac Pro, then this decision is easy. Of course I would buy one. But because there is a Mac Pro allegedly coming, I want to wait to see what that is first before I decide. Because if it's closer to what I want in having things separate and, maybe having even crazier, CPU options and stuff like that, who knows? If it's more what I want, I would choose that. The other thing I'm worried about with the iMac Pro is thermals. This is a completely new thermal design that basically they are wedging much higher wattage, hotter running parts inside of an enclosure that they didn't design the size for. Like, they took the size of the other iMac, and it seemed like they basically had as a design goal, fit these higher-end, hotter parts inside of this case that we designed for this other computer. And while they seem to have done a lot of work about the internal design of it and dealing with the internal arrangement of those thermals and everything, the fact that they didn't design the external case for it, that they basically said, wedge this into that is probably going to have limitations and side effects that I don't like. So maybe things are going to overheat and be bad over time. That's another problem I have with my iMac, is that the GPU now runs too hot, and the fan goes up constantly, and it's audible in my recordings, which was one of the reasons I finally got it fixed, because I can't have that. Maybe that's because these parts in that case, like, I got top of the line parts when it was out, so these are running pretty hot over 3 years, and eventually that starts to have problems with cooling. I I fear whether the iMac Pro will have those problems or not, because you're taking these hot parts and putting them into a case that is designed to be thin for some reason, even though nobody cares about how thick their desktop display is on the back. But it's designed to be thin rather than being designed to hold Pro components. The Mac Pro towers, on the other hand, with the exception of the cylinder, of course, although even the cylinder did have a really clever cooling design that was really good as long as you didn't use the GPUs. But the Mac Pro towers were always like, we're going to design a complete enclosure, a complete shape around being able to hold and cool the entire range of high-end Pro parts that we're going to sell for this thing. So I think it was always more likely that there would be fewer problems with thermals and things like that with the Mac Pro towers than with the iMacs. So I'm, again, like with the iMac Pro, like we still don't know how loud is it going to be. Like, are the fans going to spin up constantly and be audible or not? Because the Mac Pros are the same noise level regardless of what they're doing, pretty much. So like a Mac Pro, you don't really hear it. An iMac, you hear it if you push it. And that's kind of ungraceful, and that kind of suggests thermals don't have a lot of headroom and everything else. Now there was talk, there was a weird Geekbench result that may or may not be real. We don't really know. People are believing that it might be real. That might be the new iMac Pro CPUs, and they were reporting that they were basically an alternate version of the workstation class. Like, so Xeons, typically the highest performance Xeons for desktops, they end in W for workstation at the end of their model number, and this usually means the absolute highest clock speed for that core count that is available, because it's going to burn lots of power. So it's not quite great for like big server racks, but it's going to burn lots of power, but it's going to be really, really fast for a desktop, and it's going to need a huge fan. So those parts usually end in W. The ones in Geekbench ended in WB or just B, I think. Anyway, and they seem to be running at lower clock speeds than what we'd expect. Still good, still really fast, but it looks like they might be having to use lower wattage chips in these iMacs than what a full Xeon workstation chip would be in like a tower. And that's most likely for thermal reasons, because those are 140-watt chips, 150-watt chips usually, and an iMac chassis is usually designed to hold like, I think, like a 60 or 80-watt chip. And yeah, again, they have redesigned the internals of this to offer more cooling to fit higher wattage parts, but they also need to leave room for the GPU. And so like there's basically, we still don't know what the trade-offs are to get workstation-grade components into an iMac Pro, into the same case size. And I'm guessing the trade-offs are going to be related to fan noise under load and a possible heat ceiling that might limit the range of performance they can get out of those processors. Whereas the full-blown Mac Pro that I hope will come out sometime next year, that shouldn't have those limitations. That should be able to use full wattage parts. That should have a cooling system that has lots of headroom and that can cool quietly under load. I don't know if it will, but it should. And because the previous ones did. All of them, even the 2013 had that. So I hope the Mac Pro offers those things. And if it does, that's the computer I want to buy, not the iMac Pro. But because neither of these computers are out yet, there's probably going to be other factors that go into it. So if possible, I hope that my iMac coming back from repair can last me until the Mac Pro comes out, so I can then decide then.
There's no way you will see that hot-looking new iMac Pro and say, no, thank you, I'll wait.
We're sponsored this week by Hover. Go to hover.com/ATP to learn more and get 10% off your first purchase. And in the month of October, .design names are on sale for just $5.99. Building your online brand has never been more important. Show the world who you are and what you're passionate about without tying it to whatever publishing platform or social network is popular this year. Because that changes quickly. If you made your email address or your website not that long ago, it would have been at Juno.com or at Geocities.com. That changes really fast in this business. The best thing you can do to keep your email address and your website timeless and future-proof is to host them at your own domain name. And Hover is the best place to find, buy, and manage domains. There's no tricks, no shady upsells, no scammy add-ons, and everything comes with free Whois privacy. It's very simple and easy to use, and they have amazing support. And Hover has over 400 domain extensions to choose from to help you brand yourself online. There's lots of choices to help you find the perfect domain name. So if you are a designer or a creative professional, you can use .design instead of ending it with just .com or .biz or some other generic domain. By using .design, you tell the world exactly what you do, built right into the name. Stand out and brand yourself online with the perfect domain name for you or your business. And .design domain names are on sale for the entire month of October at Hover for just $5.99. That's 85% off your first year and half the price of a .com. So to learn more, visit hover.com/ATP. You can get 10% off your first purchase. Hover, get a domain name for your passion.
So speaking of industrial design and cooling, in one of the many interviews and books that never seems to happen, if I could get like Johnny Ive and all of like John Rubenstein and all of the people together and ask them about like past Apple designs, I would love to know what changed between like the nowadays and back when Apple made the cheese grater. Because if you think about the cheese grater, and this is what I always hope that the new Mac Pro design will be, but who knows what it'll actually be. The cheese grater, as you noted, and as Johnny Ive in his White World said, I think in the introduction for the original cheese grater, the Power Mac G5, the design of it was not so much like all the modern Johnny Ive, or not just Johnny Ive, but the modern Apple designs, like by Johnny Ive's design team, where it's like, we wanted to boil it down to its essence and find, uncomplicated, simple, direct, blah, 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 all the things they do for things that are like phones or portable things where they don't want a lot of gewgaws hanging off it. Whereas the cheese grater was, we wanted to be honest about the fact that the main job of this thing is to be a heat exchanger. Like it was modeled off of heat exchangers or air exchangers, like that are up in rooms that suck in air in one temperature on one side and eject it out the other side, a different temperature. I think that's what he said. Like the actual cheese grater was modeled off a heat exchanger, right? And so it wasn't designed to be the most sort of, it was designed to be true to its purpose, but its purpose wasn't to be a beautiful object, right? Its purpose wasn't to be portable and uncomplicated and simple and obvious. Its purpose was to exchange heat. Like that was the purpose. And so it was designed with that as a goal. And it seems like so many things that Apple makes nowadays are designed with a simplicity of form as a goal, which is a fine goal, especially for portable things. But as you said, nobody really cares that much about the simplicity of form. Like if a more honest iMac Pro on the back of it would have looked like the back of a transformer. Like it would have looked like a giant heat sink. It would have had bulges and flares and fins, or it would have looked like the underside of like a Ferrari, like all sorts of ground effects and like a diffuser. Like it would say the back of this computer is all about ejecting heat. Because honestly speaking, what is the purpose of this computer? It's the iMac Pro. It's not the iMac that's simple and elegant and just looks like a screen and you say, where's the computer? No, this is the iMac Pro. Its job is to be the fastest possible all-in-one computer that human beings can make. And the main problem of a fast all-in-one computer is getting rid of the damn heat. So the back of it looks crazy and just as big and chunky and has heat, coming out the wazoo. And that's what the cheese grater is. It is a big, giant thing. Cold air in front, hot air out back, gigantic fans, 9 fans Steve Jobs was raving, or however many the original one had. Look at all these fans. They're all computer controlled to be just the right amount of cooling at the right, so they're not all running full blast all the time. There is an elegance to it, but it is so purpose built to like you house all that hot stuff and get it cooled. So I hope the Mac Pro is not like the trash camera. It's like, what is the essence? What a form of the Mac Pro? Like, I want it to be functional, and the function is heat exchange. And things whose function is heat exchange don't look like lozenges, bars of soap, or simple, elegant designs. I mean, in many respects, the chimney Mac Pro, the trash can Mac Pro, does have a purity of purpose. Cold air in bottom, hot air out top, just like the G4 Cube, right? But it was not designed to be like, how much heat can we get rid of? Because they just had, the 2 GPUs in there and the CPU, and they couldn't even cool them well enough. Like, so it was a clever design for its size, but it was very, very small. If you want to build something with a massive heat exchanging capacity, you make it bigger. You want to have excess capacity, not be right on the borderline. So anyway, getting back to what I said, I would ask them, like, It's like the same people who were there. Johnny Ive made the cheese grater, but now he's making all these beautiful featureless things with no ports on them. What changed? Surely it wasn't Steve Jobs saying, please make me something that looks like the underside of a Ferrari, right? So someone there was like, okay, was like in the design brief, the main job of the thing that you are making is to be an efficient heat exchanger. Do that in the most elegant way that you can. And I don't imagine Steve Jobs was forcing Johnny Ive to do that. Steve Jobs probably wanted it to be like the trash can. Like, he doesn't like all the big, fins and holes all over the front and back and giant fans and stuff. He just accepts that as a cost of doing business, but they did the best job they could with it. But it's like the same people are there, but their philosophy has changed. And Apple has stopped making computers like that, whose purpose is not to be simple, obvious white Apple Pencil with no things on it and just this beautiful, perfect form. So anyway, when Johnny comes on the show, I'll ask him about it and see, like, has he changed his mind? Has his philosophy evolved? Was there someone forcing him to make those older computers the way they were? Was someone forcing him to put all those ports on the side of his laptops? Like, I don't know. So many questions. Johnny, come on the show. We'll talk.
Yeah, that's going to happen. No, I mean, I totally agree. And I wish Apple, Apple is, famously, talked about courage to remove the headphone jack, and and Apple is it's considered a very bold company for like the courageous designs they make. What they lack, it seems like in the hardware designs of their computers, is not courage but confidence. They need the confidence to know that they can make something that sacrifices visual symmetry for functionality. That doesn't take courage. It takes confidence, because you have to be able to know in your head that even if the press says, oh, it got thicker, or wow, that iMac, it looks pretty thick from the back, or whatever, like, Apple has to be confident enough to be able to say, we believe in our design because it is better that way. Even though you're saying it doesn't look as good or whatever, we know that it works better. And it seems like they don't have that confidence anymore, or it's not being, properly enforced somewhere along the way or something, because a great computer, nothing about its physical form should unnecessarily detract from how great of a computer it can be. And there are certain models in the lineup where you'd make a different choice, so things like the 12-inch MacBook, where the whole role of this computer is what is the absolute smallest, thinnest, lightest computer we can make and have it still be remotely usable. So then you make different trade-offs. But as you go up the line, as you get more and more to the larger and higher end and pro machines, and especially once you get into things like desktops, which are kind of pro by nature and have very different physical demands around them and very different usage around them, the decision always has to be made the other way of, yeah, you know what? You can make it beautiful. Have the confidence to know that you could make a beautiful design while still letting it function well as the computer that it has to be. And it seems like Apple doesn't have that confidence anymore, or they don't have that ability anymore, which is even more concerning.
I understand your point. I deeply disagree, and I think they're showing external confidence by doing things like going all in on USB-C, right? Because USB-C was not, it did not have a terribly great story when the MacBook and the MacBook Pros went all in on USB-C. And it's gotten better, but as you recently wrote about...
I was going to say the story isn't that great now.
No, and that's exactly what I was going to say. It's gotten better, but without question, there's a long way to go. And I thought your post touched on that really well. Or I shouldn't say touched on it. It handled it really well. So I think they're showing external confidence, but with a few tweaks, I think what I would say is it's the internal confidence that they lack. It's the internal confidence for some designer or whomever to go to Johnny and say, you know what? Maybe we should make this a little thicker. Or you know what? Maybe more than one port on the MacBook Adorable would be useful. Or you know what? Maybe MagSafe wasn't so bad. And I think the problem is internal courage to stand up to whoever's calling the shots on why it is these things are, as it appears to us, very crippled. Like, they're great machines. I love my MacBook Adorable. I really do. but damned if it wouldn't be great if I had one more port on it, or damned if it wouldn't be great if I had MagSafe on it. Because just yesterday, I think it was, I ripped it off my nightstand. It was charging on my nightstand.
Oh, God.
I caught the cable with my foot and it came flying off my nightstand. It's fine, thankfully, but...
Did it land in a pool of water?
No, it did not land in a pool of water, thank goodness. The waterbeds are not trendy, so we were safe there. God, can you imagine me with a waterbed? That'd be terrible.
They still have their fans.
Well, in any case, the point I'm driving at is I think it's the internal confidence that's the problem, that nobody's standing up to Johnny or the mythical version of Johnny. Who even knows if it's really Johnny anymore, but the mythical Johnny who is saying, no, this MacBook Adorable will have only one port. No, these butterfly switches are the only way to go. Whoever is making those decisions, be that an individual or a committee, I think it's the lack of internal confidence to say to them, no, this isn't right. This isn't good enough. We do need one more port on the Adorable. We do need better keyboard switches or whatever the case may be. I think that's where it's lacking.
Well, like I said, it's like what is the design brief? What is the goal here? And I think and the design philosophy and the goal for a lot of portable devices is very often don't have so much crap on it. Don't have a million buttons. Don't have a million ports. It's easier to waterproof. It's simpler. It should look simple and obvious. Having the front be all screen is a natural evolution of not having a hardware keyboard. Why not just have a screen and a single button on the front? Like that kind of elemental simplicity is very appropriate for a certain class of devices that Apple happens to sell a lot of, because you don't want a phone with a million things sticking out of it. For most consumers, it's supposed to be a thing that fits in your pocket, and even laptops, you can see an argument for there. Laptops are simpler when there's less stuff, when there's fewer moving parts, fewer seams. Just compare the original aluminum, PowerBook G4 to a current unibody one. The design goals and evolution of that, of trying to say simplify, has made a better portable computer because it flexes less, because it's, it has fewer seams. It has fewer things to go wrong on it. Even the hinge is more robust, and everything about it is simpler. And then that extending to start taking ports off, and then you start to get into, I'm not quite sure about that, but you can see kind of an argument for the simplicity. But where this goes awry is on things like the iMac Pro, and certainly the Mac Pro, the story has to be different. Your goal has to be different. You can't take that same design philosophy that works for phones and tablets and possibly also laptops, especially the small ones, and say, this same design philosophy should apply to our professional modular computer, because that's not what it's supposed to do. As Marco said, professionals don't care what the hell the back of their under desk mounted computer does. Like, it is supposed to fulfill a job, and its job is to be really fast and capable, and being really fast and capable means ejecting heat and having a lot of room inside and being reliable and stuff. And if that's your goal, like, these are the most important things. It's got to be super reliable and just chunky and very powerful and like the maximum amount of power and flexibility. You design a different thing. Like I start thinking of things like power tools or off-road vehicles, not like cars that you buy, but like actual, like, getting around on the farm or going through the jungle or whatever. Those things, they can be elegant and have nice designs, but they have a job to do, and their design is entirely focused around that job. No one is trying to say, can we get huge ground clearance on this off-road vehicle, but not have like a big gap between the wheels and the wheel well? Like, could we cover that over with something? Like, could we make it so that that we have like a skirt that when the wheels compress, the skirt moves up so it looks more elegant? It's like, what are you even doing? Are you trying to make this car look like a low slung, Tesla? Like, the whole point is it's supposed to go off-road. It's like, yeah, but it's so ugly when you can see all the suspension bits and you can see all this air under the car. I want that skirt idea. We can make the skirt work. It's like, no, don't try to make the skirt work. Like, just put huge amounts of travel and big exposed springs and shocks, and don't worry about the skirt. Don't worry about, like, the big gap. That's what it's supposed to do. Just make the best off-road vehicle you can make. That's what I want them to do with the Mac Pro. And the iMac, it's like, it has to be just as slim as the regular iMac. Why? Why would you make it just as slim as the regular iMac? Yeah, maybe you can. We're also smart with our cooling. Like, you already have the iMac. The iMac is, I don't even know where the computer is. It's so skinny. And we got rid of the optical drive so we can make it even thinner on the edge. It looks beautiful and elegant. And it does. And I think an all-in-one computer that is very thin and elegant and has a beautiful screen is a product they should make. And they do. It's the 5K iMac. It's great. when they go to make the iMac Pro, why is like design brief hasn't changed, yet it's supposed to be like the fastest computer you could buy, especially remember, as I pointed out before, they weren't going to make the Mac Pro. The iMac Pro was going to be their top of the line, and still they said it's got to fit in the same case. And that's what's wrong. Like they have the wrong goal even before they begin executing. And I don't know where that comes from. I don't know why that philosophy is extended. Maybe it's they just think all technology should be like that, but they didn't always think like this. And the cheese grater Mac Pro is the perfect proof. Johnny Ive made that computer and talked about it. His team made that thing, and it is perhaps the most brutally utilitarian thing that Apple has ever made. It's a big silver heat exchanger with freaking handles on it with a huge amount of space in it. That's what I want. I mean, not that exact design, but I want that philosophy executed well.
Yeah, and the thing is, that giant metal tower full of fans and everything, and ports in the back, and huge air holes in the front and back, that thing is beautiful. That is the nicest PC tower I've ever seen, bar none. It's not even close. And for people who love computers and who need high-end pro computers, that is beautiful. You don't have to make it ugly. People who look at that and say, that's ugly, are people who hate computers. It seems like the people who were responsible for designing computers at Apple hate computers. And I don't say this lightly. What I mean to say here is literally that it seems like the computers at Apple are designed with the goal of hiding and getting rid of as much of the computer as possible. And there is a place for that. Again, there's a place for that in like the ultra thin and light, the MacBook, 12-inch and everything, and even maybe the Airs, although we're going backwards in that direction as well in the Air range. But at the high end, you are selling to people who need computers and, in many cases, who love computers. And those people don't want you to hide everything away, especially when it comes at the cost of practicality and functionality. Those people are happy to see the computer. We are happy to have ports and air holes and a little bit more thickness in order to get like a better keyboard or better battery life or something else. Like, that market isn't trying to get rid of the computer. They're buying a computer. They like computers. And the pros want to see, the pros want a pro piece of gear. The people who buy the giant off-road vehicles are not looking at them and saying, man, this thing's so ugly, it's a shame no one can make these things prettier. No, they love the way they look. They buy them because of the way they look, partially, and their functionality as well. Some people just for the looks, but, so to make a honkin' Mac Pro tower that's full of high-powered, the best components they can make, cooled with giant slow fans so they can be really efficient and really quiet even under load, that is beautiful. And that is good design for a high-end pro computer. What they seem to be doing now instead is applying the wrong design principles to, what John said, what these tools are here to do, they're applying the same principles as they're applying to the ultra-thin 12-inch ultra-portable. That's not good design. Design is how it works. A famous guy said that once. Design is taking the requirements that the people have who are going to use this thing and making something that works well with those requirements and also hopefully looks decent in the process. But design is about those requirements and how you literally design the work to accommodate those. So what they're doing when they make a pro computer that has massive practical problems when used professionally or when used by anybody, that's actually bad design, no matter how it looks. And so they really need, I think, to shift this thinking, and I hope they have with the Mac Pro. They really need to shift this thinking back into, it is okay to make a computer that looks like a computer. There is nothing wrong with having a high-end pro desktop that's probably going to cost $8,000 to have that be a little bit bulky and to have that, go under your desk and to have that look like a square with ports in the back and fans in the back. That's fine. That's actually what people want. And to those people, if that is designed well, it will be beautiful, no matter how it looks.
They could have it designed like a Star Trek spaceship. Like, it can be cool, but it has to be fulfilling its job, and its job is to eject heat and hold lots of things and be super fast. And it's just, you end up with a different shape. You end up with a different everything about it. There's lots of options available, lots of things I'm imagining. Where it gets fuzzier, I think, and I was thinking about this when I was looking at the bunch of laptops around the table at work. A lot of people at work now have the same thing. I have the 2017 MacBook Pro with its 4 little USB-C/Thunderbolt 3 ports all around the sides of it. But then other people still have the 2015 ones, like, and earlier, right? And honestly, when they're all sitting around the table like that, other than the fact that the new ones are space gray for the most part, they don't look that different. Like, you can tell that the new ones are thinner and the screens are nicer, right? But the other ones don't look that bad. But I look at the sides of the other ones, and like, they don't look that much thicker. But then I see SD card, HDMI port, MagSafe, USB-A. I'm like, and I think, again, we talked about this when they did the Mac Roundtable, and I was like, but didn't they say something about maybe they'll be reconsidering their choices with the MacBook Pros and coming out with new ones that appeal to people more? And I kept thinking, like, that maybe in the future they would reconsider their decisions and, like, put an SD card slot on it, or, like, just make different decisions about ports and stuff like that. Sort of backpedal on the relentless simplification on their biggest laptop. And I'm not expecting them to make a keyboard that's not the same size as the small ones. I'm not going crazy here, but I'm just saying, like, the utility of, like, I think a lot of people are jealous at work of the people who come in with the old laptops and just plug their thing right into the projector with no dongles, right? Or that, the MagSafe of ripping the thing in and out and then get up from their desk and stuff. And maybe they're also jealous of me with my single wire connecting with all the other stuff. So there's advantages to Thunderbolt as well. But, like, I think of it this way. If they came out with the new MacBook Pro that had an SD card and HDMI on it, a lot of people would love it. And I'm trying to think who would hate it. The people like, I don't want that additional complexity. I never use HDMI. Would they hate it? Would they just be like, oh, whatever, I don't care, I don't use those ports? Like, who would really hate it, other than saying you've just mucked up my perfect, clean, symmetrical design? But I don't think people who buy them care that much about it. And the people who would love it, boy, would they love it. So in this new Mac renaissance of where we all believe Apple's turned a corner on the Mac and is paying more attention to it and is going to make a Mac Pro, and they're making the iMac Pro, and they're doing all these things, I'm waiting to see how far does the Mac renaissance go. We know it goes far enough that they revived a line of computers that they weren't going to do. So that's great. I love it. Like, and that gives me hope for everything else. But a real test may be, what happens to the 15-inch? Do they go more utilitarian in any way on it? Do any ports come back? Is there any recognition that some decisions made with the current line of computers may not be exact, even if it's the keyboard, which is a topic of conversation this week, which we may or may not to get to in the show? Do they change their thinking on the keyboard and say, we need to take another run at this in a big way? Even if the new keyboard is just as thin as the old one, to just have a different philosophy of saying, like, we need to rethink this. Like, how much are they willing to reconsider on the models that are not I was going to say are not the very, very top end, but the 15-inch is their top end laptop, right? How much are they willing to reconsider? And I'm still maintaining fantasies that they're going to be willing to reconsider a lot. That the new Mac Pro will be the giant purpose-built heat exchanger that I was describing. That the iMac Pro really will be amazingly fast and competent, even if it isn't the same case. And that the new line of laptops, like, we'll see that they're learning from their mistakes and they make different decisions about it. And they can make a big deal out of it. Like, we heard you. We know you don't want as many dongles. So now there's HDMI and an SD card, or whatever they decide. Like, that would be a huge applause line. Tons of people would love it. It would make the computers more popular. Some people will be disappointed that it's not as simple, but how many? How many who don't work in the sealed off frosted glass area with Johnny Ive would actually be disappointed by those computers?
Yeah.
So, Johnny Ive, come on the show. We're waiting for you.
We are sponsored this week by Betterment. Rethink what your money can do. Visit betterment.com/ATP for more information. Betterment is the largest independent online financial advisor designed to help improve customers' long-term returns and lower taxes for retirement planning, building wealth, and your other financial goals. Betterment takes advanced investment strategies and uses technology to deliver them to more than 270,000 customers. Betterment's experts have your back. They believe you should be able to get financial advice anytime, anywhere. So all Betterment customers can receive advice from their team of licensed financial experts through their mobile app's messaging feature. And Betterment is a fiduciary. This means that they do not get commissions for recommending funds, and they don't have any funds of their own. They do what they believe is right for you. With low, transparent advisory fees compared to traditional services, Betterment's fees are only 0.25% annually, and that includes unlimited messaging across to their team of licensed financial experts. And if you have a more complex situation, if you want unlimited phone call access to talk to their team of certified financial planners, they give you that for only 0.4% annually. And now Betterment's offering a free 5-minute investment review, helping you assess your investment accounts, tax strategies, fees, and risk exposure with no sign-up required. So visit betterment.com/ATP. That's betterment.com/ATP to start your review today. Investing involves risk. Betterment, rethink what your money can do. By the way, there was one thing about that picture I posted about my setup that you appear not to have noticed.
Your glass of water?
John, how many dongles do I have?
I don't know. There's a whole. Some of them are black and some of them are white, so I can't really tell. I got to zoom in. Am I at 100% on this? Let's see. Zoom in. I see.
John, what shape are my arrow keys?
Oh, they're not full size. Is that the screen's different? I can tell from the screen board. That's 2015.
Yes, it is.
Oh God!
But you still have a dongle. What is that? Ethernet?
Yeah.
The Ethernet dongle.
Yeah, Thunderbolt Ethernet.
And then you've got the MagSafe. What is the black thing coming out?
Optical audio.
Optical audio,
which doesn't exist in the new ones, but does exist on my iMac.
The trackpad is smaller, and the little cutout where the finger thing where you reach in to get the lip to open it up is actually not as wide as well, I believe. Anyway, yeah. Now, do you have a 20? I can't keep track of what laptops you have. Do you still have a 2016 or 17?
I do, but not for long. I'm going to sell it.
All right. And where did this 15 come? Is this just one of your old ones, or did you buy another one?
eBay.
Can't you just buy these directly from Apple now?
You can. They still sell them. Yeah, they still sell them brand new. This is the base CPU, the 2.2 with the 512 SSD, which is I required a bigger SSD. When I actually had one of these, in 2015, it was only the 256 SSD, and it killed me. One of the reasons I had to upgrade was just because I just kept slamming into that because once you're doing iOS development, you need a ton of disk space to keep up with all the betas and everything else. So anyway, so 512 SSD, everything else is base on it, and it has AppleCare because it was bought in September of 2016, like a month before the new ones came out. So it has AppleCare till 2019. The battery only had 50 cycles on it, and it was $1,600. To get the same thing new from Apple with AppleCare would be $2,800.
Oof.
So I decided to go used on it, and it's totally great. And here's basically what happened here is my plan of getting the 2017 15-inch and using it all summer at the beach, and then bringing it home and bringing the LG 5K home and using that as my desktop until the Mac Pro comes out. That plan ended up being just not working for me because it ends up the 15-inch is not a great desktop. It can serve as one with the LG display. Like, it can be a desktop, but it's not a very good desktop. I would rather use my 3-year-old iMac that is purpose built for that than use the weird weird clamshell and everything else. So I'm just going to try to keep using my iMac. And I gave these butterfly keyboards a year. I first had a 2016 Touch Bar 15-inch, sold it, switched to the MacBook Escape, sold that to my Curly, and switched back to this summer when I had this harebrained desktop idea. I gave this keyboard a year. I've had the 2016 version and the 2017 version. They're all just incredibly incompatible with me. I thought I'd get used to it. I didn't. I hated every single minute of typing on it. Every single time I would think to use that computer, I would be it would turn me off from wanting to use my laptop to have that keyboard there, because every single time I typed on that keyboard, I hated it. And every time I said, maybe everyone's right and I'll get used to it. And I gave it a year, people, and I didn't get used to it. And every time I would see someone else's, like John, what you were just saying about the conference room. Every time I would see someone else's 2015 era 13 or 15 inch Retina MacBook Pro, I would be like, oh man, I wish I never sold mine. I like that so much better. Eventually, I started browsing eBay. I'm like, you know what? These are not that expensive to get one that's very lightly used. These are really pretty inexpensive, and I can sell the one I have for probably like $2,800. And so I waffled about it for a while, and I was worried. I'm like, is it going to feel really old? Am I going to regret losing USB-C? Am I going to regret that it's bigger and heavier? Is just everything going to feel and look old, and I'm going to feel like I'm stepping back into the past? My impression of this has quite surprised me, actually. Nothing about it feels bigger or heavier. It is, but it's such a small difference that honestly, when you go the other direction, you don't really notice it. Like, it's a half pound heavier, and it's a couple of millimeters wider in each dimension or something like that. Like, it's not that much different. Like, you didn't, like, for all the crazy things we gave up to go to the super thin, USB-C models, it didn't actually get that much thinner or that much lighter. So, and the battery life is better on 2015s, by the way. On this used 2015 model, the battery life is better than my almost new 2017 model, and not by a small amount either. So, because surprise, the battery is 33% bigger. So it's that actually matters, even with an older processor. So anyway, you don't notice the size difference when you go the other direction. I did not notice the loss of the trackpad size. I did not, you just immediately adjust. In fact, it's actually easier because now there's no more accidental trackpad input when you brush against it. I did not notice the loss of the touch bar because I always hated it and never really got into using it. I occasionally miss Touch ID, but not much. I love having the arrow keys back to the way they were because I can feel them. Because you need arrow keys that have a different shape than the rest of the keys because they are far away from the home row. So when you reach over to them, you are not as precise as you would be with keys near the home row because you're moving your hand a little bit. So you need there to be some kind of tactile feedback so you can feel where the right keys are in order to hit the right one. That's why the new generation arrow keys that have no metal gap in them and that are all the same height are so easy to hit the wrong one on, because your hand is moving over there and has nothing to anchor itself based on feel. So the arrow keys in this are perfect. They feel wonderful. The rest of the keyboard is perfect and feels wonderful. For about a second, it felt mushy, and then it felt great. So that took no adjustment time. The ports are luxurious. I got to remove, a whole bag full of stuff from my travel bag. Like, I got to remove so much crap, so many dongles. My entire dongle bag is now just in storage until I have to switch back to a USB-C sometime in the future. So that's, like, my travel bag is so simple. It's just the laptop and a power adapter and a couple of the USB cables that I was already bringing before because nothing else in the world is USB-C. So, like, I was already traveling with USB to Lightning cables so I could plug them into hotel, lamp tables and stuff. So I'm just using those now to travel with, and the computer and the power cable. That's it. I don't need an SD card reader. I don't need any dongles. I don't need any hubs and HDMI adapters and everything. It just works. And it's all built in, and it looks great, and it feels great, and it feels like a computer that was designed for use, not a computer that I have to adapt myself to it. This computer was designed for me to use it. And I am just so much happier. The only thing I miss about the new one, I don't miss the thinness, I don't miss the lightness, I don't miss the space gray. Because, by the way, the space gray, that's a very fragile coating, and that'll chip pretty easily if you even nick it a little bit. The only thing I miss, surprisingly, is I actually kind of miss having USB-C for power. Even though I don't miss the USB-C brick that doesn't have the little cable management wings, it is nice to be able to use other third-party chargers. So, for example, like the Anker 60-watt thing that I have, it would be like, it's nice to use that. It would be nice to be able to use USB-C batteries if I needed to on the plane. But ultimately, that isn't that much of a problem because this thing has a 99.5 watt-hour battery in it. It's a pretty big battery. The battery life is pretty good. I probably won't need a battery in practice. It's just great. It doesn't feel noticeably slow. It doesn't there's no other downsides to it. And in fact, when you buy an old one off of eBay, not only do you save a ton of money, all the accessories cost way less than they did when they were new. So long ago, I got rid of my Thunderbolt to Ethernet adapter because I thought I would never use it again. So I had to buy a new one to use Ethernet here at home for this because that's how I like to run my computers. And, I think when it was new, it was like 30 or 40 or $50. I got one on eBay new for I think $19. I have another power adapter, an extra power adapter coming tomorrow, also new. That was $30. It's just, it's just great. I think there's a reason they still sell this because it's a fantastic computer that I bet a lot of people are still buying. It's just great. I'm so happy with it, and I hope that I can use it until they make a computer that actually is better for me.
I have thoughts.
Of course you do.
So, first of all, this is the epitome of different strokes for different folks, right? Because I have basically this machine as a work machine, and we are still buying or really leasing this machine brand new for incoming employees, incoming engineers. We do not have a Touch Bar Mac that is being issued by my company yet. I forget the reasoning behind it, but it basically boils down to it provides little to no benefit, so why bother? Every time I'm away from my desk and away from my wireless Magic Keyboard and have to type on my work laptop's keyboard, I hate it. God, do I hate it. It's mushy, it's sloppy, and it just feels friggin' gross. And it's funny to me because you have the exact same opinion, but the other direction. in that we are like polar opposites on this. And you know what? That's fine. Everyone has an opinion. That's okay. What works for you is great. What works for me is great. And that's fine. But it's funny to me that you prefer this so heavily, particularly the keyboard. Like the rest of it, yeah, that makes sense. But particularly the keyboard, I'm surprised you prefer it that much. My question for you, though, is what's your long game on this? Like, you just going to pull a Siracusa and run this until you can't get whatever ridiculous California code name is, like 3 or 4 versions from now? Like, what is the long game? Because eventually, I reckon you're either... So there's only a couple of ways to go, right? You use this until you can't anymore, and then you're going to have to figure out a new plan. You wait for Apple to have an oops, we're sorry, which, to be fair, is certainly possible, but not exactly their style.
And I would say unlikely.
Yeah, and unlikely. And I feel like I had a third, but I lost it. But you see what I'm saying? Like, you just go to, I guess you buy a Lenovo? Like, what is the long play for you then?
I mean, I could Hackintosh it with someone else's laptop, but no, I mean, the long-term play here is I hope this lasts me long enough that I either stop caring about having a good laptop, stop needing a good laptop, or Apple starts making better ones. And as simple as that. I mean, I hope it lasts that long. If not, I'm going to have to figure something else out. It could be next summer they might release a new one that I like and that I switch to that. I have no idea. But honestly, I think that would be too soon. That would seem very unlikely to me. My long-term plan here is like when the scroll direction changed in Mac OS, whenever that, when was that? Like Lion or something? It was a while ago now.
Yeah, maybe even earlier than that.
Yeah. So when the scroll direction changed, I thought, they have an option to keep it the other direction, but we know how Apple is. There's only going to be a limited time that option is going to be there, so I might as well get used to the new one now and switch. So I switched immediately, hated it, gave it like a few days, still hated it, and I switched back. I thought, you know what? There might come a time where I don't have this choice anymore, but that time hasn't come yet. So let me just enjoy the way I like it while I still have the choice. And then when the time comes that forces me to make a choice I don't want to make, I'll deal with it then. So that's kind of my philosophy with this. Like, this is not a sustainable plan to just keep using the 2015 MacBook Pro forever. Like, obviously, that's not a sustainable plan. but I don't need to give it up right now. I am way happier with this laptop right now than I am with the 2017 model. And so I can use this for probably a while. I'm probably going to want to move to something else before I'm forced to move to something else. And so I might as well enjoy this while I can, while it is still great, while it is still competitive and useful and works great. When the time comes, for whatever reason, that stops being the case, then I'll figure it out then.
Real-time follow-up, it was Lion, by the way, where they added the feature. And
all right.
I still have that in the non-default setting as well, because I
Wait. The two of you are saying that you are not on natural scrolling? You're on the scrolling from the 80s?
Old school, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, my word, you're so old. The two of you. I'm so disappointed in you. You're so old.
There's no reason to change it. Like, I mean, I didn't even try to get used to the new way, because they gave you an option from day one to not do that. I'm like, oh, well, it's not even a plist hack. It's a GUI option. Uncheck, never think about it again. And they've sustained that. Like, it's still there. Still, you can do the opposite way, and so that's the way I like it. I also remap Command N to a new folder, because I've been doing that since I was 10 years old, and there's a feature in the operating system that lets you assign keyboard shortcuts to any menu in any application, and it's a supported thing, so of course I do it. Like, I don't see why I wouldn't. Like, that's part of a computer being a computer, right? That's what separates us from the multipad mongrels, right? Like, we can do, you don't like the keyboard shortcut. Guess what? I can reassign it, and not by hacking something. It's a feature of the operating system.
There's a workflow for that.
It's system preferences. You just go there and type, like, it's a real thing. Anyway, yeah. And I kind of feel the same way about scroll direction. Like, if forced, they take that away and there's no plist hack or whatever, I probably won't go to heroic links to get it back, but I might grumble. But
you might grumble?
Yeah. I think Marco's plan is mostly sustainable, because, like, I still keep thinking, perhaps wrongly, that we are in the beginnings of a Mac renaissance, and that it's going to take a while because computers take a long time. Like, the pipeline is long, but that Apple is indeed reconsidering some of its broad decisions about how it makes Macs. And so the new keyboard that has more travel and is more reliable and is more pleasing to people who don't like the new one and is only on the 15-inch model or whatever, that's not coming, like, anytime soon. But if they start on it now, in 3 years, it will be here. And that's, like, them reconsidering how they build their computers and what people want out of them. Like, satisfying Mac users. Again, that Mac Roundtable. Everything they said in that Mac Roundtable was essentially, we hear you, we've realized we've been doing things in the wrong way, and we're going to change course and try to do them in the right way, like the way that will make everybody happy. Starting with, hey, the Mac Pro, we were going to get rid of it. We didn't think it was necessary, but actually it is. How far that goes, I don't know. But if you're a little patient, I think you have to give it time, because it takes, there's a long pipe, the pipeline takes a while to flush all this bad stuff out of the system before you see the new ones. And it's just a question of how far they'll go. The Mac Pro is going to be a great test. If the Mac Pro comes out and it's another cylinder type exercise, that does not bode well for Marco's eBay computer, because he's going to be hanging on to that for a while he waits for the, one approach they could take is, we know a lot of people love the new keyboard, and I kind of like it too, by the way. Like, I almost never use it, so I think my laptop at work is actually a great test case, because if my laptop keyboard at work dies, that's a bad sign, because I type on it so little. Like, I type on my other keyboard all the time, and just use it as a desktop, but it could be that a lot of people like that, and one way they could go is, we'll just make that reliable. Find a way to make that keyboard that feels like that Casey really likes, and that a lot of other people really like, and that I kind of like too, other than the arrow keys and all the other laptop keyboard crap that I hate just because of key layout. Just make that reliable. If that's what they do in 3 years, again, bad sign for Marco. So we have many things to be watching, but I'm still entertaining fantasies that they are really turning the ship here, and they're going to let the Mac be the Mac in hardware and in software, and make all of us old school Mac users happy. Because honestly, like, who are you trying to make happy with the Macs? Who's super happy with these new computers? Many people might like them, and I know a lot of people do like the new keyboard, but I don't think anybody's head over heels for the new laptops. And nobody was really head over heels for the new Mac Pro either. So there's some work to be done there, and Apple says they're going to do it, and I feel like I want to give them a chance to bowl me over.
Before we leave this topic, we should also mention the amazing article by Casey Johnson at the Outline about the keyboards that came out yesterday. That, like, you know, basically going through her process of, like, having to get keys repaired multiple times at the Genius Bar, the crazy things they tell her, the like feigned surprise. Oh, it must be a speck of dust. It's like, come on, this is a widespread issue. Like, they should know about this by now. It's a great article that I think everybody should read. It spawned a lot of discussion around the other blogs as well. Pretty much everyone linked to it and said, "Yeah, me too." You know, and you know, so it's pretty great. And you know, just to add to this, there are a lot of people when stuff like this comes out, like when we complain about the keyboard here, or when other people complain about it, or even when people report problems with it, there's a lot of people who are like, "Well, I love it. It's my favorite keyboard ever, and the old ones all feel like crap to me now." Well, not that different from Casey's opinion of it. And I want to just state two separate things here. You know, number one, you can love it. You can love the way the new keyboard feels. That is a separate thing from, is it reliable or not? Like, if the new keyboard has as many problems as it appears to have anecdotally, from almost everyone I know who has one, and almost everyone who I've asked on Twitter, problems are widespread with keys getting stuck or breaking. Widespread. It certainly seems like this is a pretty big problem. And it's also important to point out, these laptops aren't very old, and they're having these problems already. You know, in many cases, they have these problems within a few months of ownership. So it's, you know, there are problems with this keyboard. You can like it. You can like the way it feels. But if it has problems with reliability, it's a bad keyboard, regardless of what you think of yours personally. My second thing to point out is that these aren't the only two choices we have. You have the 2015 and earlier keyboard, and you have the, you know, MacBook hard as a rock keyboard that breaks constantly. There are other options for keyboards that Apple can use. And in fact, they already have one, and Casey already loves it. It's called the Magic Keyboard 2. The Magic Keyboard 2 is very, very thin. It has Johnny's dumb layout where there's no space between any of the keys, and the arrow keys are all the same, so they're all square and have no gaps, so you can't feel where they are. So it satisfies Apple's needs to be thin and be symmetric at the cost of feeling good. It has pretty shallow travel, feels very precise, has a much more precise click and less wobbliness than the old 2015 laptop keyboards. Best thing is, that uses scissor switches. The old, reliable scissor switches that didn't die when one speck of dust got in one key. Apple already has the solution to this problem. They can have a modern, clickier feel with lower travel. They can have the stupid layout that they want of the keys with no space and bad arrow keys. And it can be super thin, but it can also have reliable key switches that also do provide a little more travel than the MacBook keyboard and a little less travel than the 2015 keyboard. So it's kind of this nice happy medium there, and it should be way more reliable. So all they have to do is take that keyboard that they already make and find a way to put that into laptops. And if you go to a store and you look at a Magic Keyboard, they're pretty damn thin. I have a feeling that Apple can figure out how to do that.
So being the optimist again, I think that, you know, again, it takes a while for these decisions to make it from, like, we've decided to do a thing to manifesting a product, so it still could be years. But their recent changes in the iOS device line give me some optimism here. One of the best examples is both the iPhone 7 and the iPhone 10, and I guess the 8s as well. Like, the iPhone 7 prioritizing battery life and going with the same form factor for the third year in a row and getting so much better battery life than the 6. And also the 10 not being, you know, even thinner than the 7, like saying we're going to, you know, either make it thicker or keep it the same thickness, and we're going to spend that on battery, the 2 extra hours of battery life, shows a change in philosophy from every single year we're going to keep making it thinner and thinner and just try to maintain. Past 2 iterations have been we're not going to try to make it thinner at all costs and just maintain. We want to increase battery life. 7 was better than the 6, and this 10 is way better than the 7. 2 hours they advertise, and that's exactly what we've been asking them to do. You're making the wrong choices. You're making it too thin. Go in the other direction. And it took many, many years for that to happen, but they did it. So I am optimistic that even if it's not the exact Magic Keyboard, that 3 years from now, the new professional laptop will have a keyboard that is reliable and maybe that also has more key travel. Maybe not, because I don't know what the percentages are for people who like the new one and people who don't. And like I said, I kind of like it. But certainly the reliability, whatever they have to do there. And by the way, on the reliability front, someone who's been using scissor switch keys for a long time and who's had them on laptops for a long time, they are way more reliable, obviously, than the butterfly ones have proven to be. But they're also less reliable than their predecessors. I have broken keyboards with these scissor switches multiple times. I've worn through at least one, possibly two, because one of my keys is sometimes wonky at work, aluminum Apple extended keyboards. I have broken keys on PowerBook G4 era computers, which also had scissor switches under their very different looking keycaps, right? I have never broken a key switch on an Apple Extended 2, which I used for years and years and years, since like 1989 or whatever when the SE30 came out. I have never broken a key switch on any keys before that. So if you want to compare reliability for the little plastic scissor switch things compared to the quote-unquote mechanical keys and other keyboards, another term that drives me nuts, as if scissor switches are not mechanical, it is a downgrade in reliability for size. It's just a question of, is it an acceptable downgrade? Me using an Apple aluminum extended keyboard for 7 years and then I break a key, I'm like, all right, I've been pounding on this keyboard 8 hours a day at work for 7 years. I accept that I have now broken one of the very commonly used keys, and I can kind of get it to fix because I'm pretty good at like prying off these keycaps and putting it back on, but it's always a little bit wonky. And you know what? 7 years, good job, keyboard. You're filthy anyway because I haven't been cleaning you well enough. Buy another keyboard for $50 and you're fine. That I think we're all willing to trade that, even though Apple Extended 2, you could, defend yourself from a mugger with and it will still work fine. Like, it's just, there is no, you know what I mean? Like, literally never broke. I remember I dropped a pocket knife off a high shelf and it landed on the keyboard with like the blade out, because I don't know why I had my knife with my blade out, and it like cut off like the corner of one of the keys. The thing was still fine. Like, enough force to actually cut the plastic of the keycap of the key switch was fine. So the thing was like a tank. But, so there's leeway for Apple to be thinner, be more elegant, be lighter weight, reduce reliability. Just don't reduce it quite that much. And it feels like they've gone too far with this one. So I have some hope that they are going to turn the ship on this one. And it frustrates me that none of us know how widespread this problem really is. We just, it's all anecdotes and like, oh yeah, of course, everyone who's going to respond to Casey's article, not this Casey, the other one, is going to be like people who have keyboard problems. And the same thing with like when Marco was complaining about the keyboard, a year ago. Of course, we heard from all the other people who hate the keyboard and all the other people who have reliability problems, right? But we can't tell percentage-wise. It's not a representative sample. It's just the people who are at the extremes and probably mostly people that agree with us. But Apple knows, and I think Apple geniuses probably kind of know, because they're just there taking all the repairs and stuff. So I wish we knew exactly how much we're overreacting to this or not, but anecdotally, it just seems so clear that, like Marco said, these are new computers. The keyboards are already failing. Casey Johnston's article, like, it is it is of a type. It is of, a very typical article where if you are in the industry of like writing about these type of products and you personally have to bring your brand new computer back 3 times because the keyboard won't work, that's I'm writing an article about this because this is way outside the realm of expectation. 3 times? Like, fine. Some of you get it and it doesn't work once. You get it repaired. Like, now that it's repaired, it'll be fine. Especially if it's like, you bring it in, oh, well, this is the new 2017 keyboard with the rubber blah, blah, blah. Now it's repaired and it's fine. But if you bring it in and they replace a huge piece of the computer at great expense, and it's just, all you've done is start the timer again, and go. Tick, 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 tick. Oh, 6 weeks have passed. Now bring it back in again. That'll be another $300 to $700 and new one. And just like, that's just a bad design. Like, if there's no hope, if you feel like bringing it in and getting huge parts of your computer replaced because it's all one giant thing doesn't make you feel like now this problem is fixed. All it makes you feel like is you just started a timer on the next failure again. That's just a bad design. And that's, I really hope that, we're capturing these devices and we're looking at the issue and we're taking stock and it's actually not that big a percentage and blah, 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 blah. Like, I don't know what to believe, but I do know the hopelessness of that feeling. I kind of felt it with my Thunderbolt display when I would bring it in and get it quote unquote repaired with huge amounts of the guts replaced, but then I would get it back and the same problem would be there. And I had to bring that in 3 times as well, but luckily the third time was the charm and, that did it. But these keyboards, I have very little faith that your third repair is going to be any more successful than your first or second repair, especially if you got the quote-unquote new keyboard on the second repair and the third repair. So this is all the type of thing that makes me believe that Apple will change its mind on this, design a new keyboard or adapt the magic one that the other Casey, this is so confusing, that Casey List loves. And in 2 to 3 years, we will see a new 15-inch with these new keys, and Apple will talk about it in a subtle but not particularly self-deprecating way, and we will all cheer, and it'll be safe for Marco to buy one unless it still has no ports, in which case he'll still be angry.
Well, just for the record, I have not used a Touch Bar MacBook Pro for more than about 45 seconds in an Apple store. So that could be the utter filth and dumpster fire that everyone says it is. I don't know. But I do freaking love my MacBook Adorable. Are there things I would change? Sure. I would love to have one more port. I would love to have MagSafe. But in the grand scheme of things, I freaking love this computer. It's all of the good parts of the iPad, except without that iOS thing that holds you back. And so I love this computer. I am looking forward to one day in 2 years or something like that, eventually getting a Touch Bar MacBook Pro at work and seeing what that's like. I love my iMac. Well, you know what I mean. I love my iMac. I am hopeful, however, that especially this keyboard that I think, Marco, you made a really great point earlier. I do like it. I absolutely like it, but I also concur that it is not as reliable as it should be. And I had to buy it, and we talked about it on the show. I had to buy a can of compressed air, which is the first time I bought one in probably a decade, because I needed to blow out this microscopic piece of dust from under the keyboard such that it would operate properly again. And it turns out I just moved it to a different key. And the second time I blew it out, and I think that actually did it. But that's not an acceptable answer, right? I've never had to blow out an Apple keyboard before. And I just hope that Apple is willing, and I think they is willing to revisit this in the future. But I love this iMac and I love this MacBook Adorable. And we'll see what happens with my next computer whenever I buy it. The other thing I wish this MacBook Adorable had, though, was Touch ID or Face ID, ? That would be cool. Do we think that's coming?
Yeah, before this is turned into the Mac show, which happens occasionally. Sorry, people. We're Mac users.
Have they seen the show art? It shouldn't be that much of a surprise.
Yeah, so Face ID as a Mac has been in here for a while, and I just want to touch on this, especially in light of Marco talking about iMac Pro versus Mac Pro. I forget how we know that the iMac Pro is going to have a secure enclave. Did Apple just announce that, or did people just ask the person who was in front of the computer at WWDC?
I don't remember.
I think it was in some firmware reference or some EFI reference somewhere.
Well, anyway, one of the potential advantages of an all-in-one computer, kind of like the advantage that Apple, leveraged to bring the 5K iMac at first, is that you can do a lot of stuff when everything is inside the same case. So a weird display controller with the timing controller and the dual internal cable, you can do all that, and it's all in one box. You don't have to worry about that. They can give you a 5K screen in the iMac before they can give it to you on the Mac Pro or some other computer with an external thing, because they don't want to have 2 wires connecting it and it's inelegant and blah, blah, blah. Well, one of the other things that you can do is stuff like Face ID, where you've got the secure enclave and you're guaranteed to have a camera and you know where the camera is and you know what the quality of it is. And, you've got it pointed at the person's face, and you've got all the sensors and the IR dot thing and so on and so forth. So Face ID starts to take off and works well. I really do want to see it on Macs. And, the all-in-one computers, both the laptops and the iMac, are a perfect place for it to appear. We were talking about Touch ID and the touch bar on Macs, like on a separate keyboard, but that poses a lot of problems. Can the touch bar work over Bluetooth? If the secure enclave is inside the keyboard, how does that communicate? And similarly with Face ID and the IR sensor and the camera and everything, if Apple makes an external display, which they're making an external display, but they want to put Face ID in it, they could do it. But how does that communicate back to the host computer? I guess the answer is it'll just be Thunderbolt 3 and it'll be no problem. But that's an additional complexity that makes that monitor even more complex and more fraught and more potentially flaky than if everything is in the same box. So I don't know if the iMac Pros will have Face ID. Kind of seems like they wouldn't, just because I feel like the timing of their production and the timing of the iPhone X production don't match up in a way that I would expect the first iteration of the iMac Pro to have them. But I fully expect, and I think Apple should, integrate Face ID into all of their Macs eventually if it works well. Much more so than Touch ID, which has been integrated into the laptops but hasn't made it to the desktops. And having I have a laptop with Touch ID now, and it's not the best implementation. It's a little bit slow, but I would love it if I just open the lid on my laptop and it unlocked by seeing my face, because it's the perfect scenario. When you lift the lid on your laptop, chances are even better than when you use a phone that you will be facing it. That's how you open the lid on your laptop, when it's facing you, right? It's like, here I am, and you open it up and your face comes right into view. Whereas your phone, you could pull it out of your pocket or whatever, might be facing a weird direction. Much more challenging there. And similarly on iMac, you sit down in front of your computer, boy, it's got a great view of your face. It can spray those IR dots all over. It's right there. Everything's built into one thing. And so I really hope they do bring that to Macs. I really hope they kind of skip Touch ID and say, well, we brought Touch ID to our laptops and it's okay, but you know what? Let's just skip right to Face ID, because even more so than Casey's beloved watch unlock, Face ID is the ultimate.
I was going to say, because it's super quick now. Super quick. Between the new watch and the new OS, it is super fast.
But you don't have to have your watch on, and you can just sit down, and different people can sit down and can recognize who they are and switch to their account. If they can do that well and fast, that is a better future for authentication on the Mac than Touch ID ever could be. And it solves so many problems. The only downside is it's more difficult to do on the Mac Pro. Supposedly their top-end computer, now you have to figure out a way to, get those cameras scanned. And maybe I'm overblowing it. Maybe Thunderbolt really does solve this problem entirely for them. Maybe they have plenty of bandwidth and side channels for all these weird sensors and everything, and there's no problem with the drivers. I just worry it will be less reliable than it is in the iMac, where they've got everything inside the same case.
The other problem is with laptops is that you have a pretty severe thickness limitation on the screen lid. The screen lid is extremely thin. They can't even fit a decent front-facing camera in the laptops. You can get a $3,000 MacBook Pro that's brand new, and the FaceTime camera on it is worse than the iPhone 5S's FaceTime camera or something. It's really, really bad front cameras on the Macs. Possibly for cost reasons, because they just don't care, but most likely also because of thickness reasons, that those screen lids are super thin. And I don't know if they can fit good enough sensors into those screen lids on the laptops to actually achieve Face ID anytime soon.
I think the camera is probably good enough already. It's just I don't know how thick the IR sprayer dip thing is. Yeah. I mean, as soon as we get the iFixit teardown of the phone, are they using all that thickness for the additional sensors, or are actually those sensors super thin and it's no problem? I feel like it can fit. There's not as much room as there is on a phone, but you can always make it a millimeter or two thicker. I wouldn't say that they should go with the bulge, but maybe not the first generation, but down the line, those sensors, there's nothing inherent about the sensors, optically speaking, that makes me think they can't have it. And I think the camera is plenty good enough already. It's just the auxiliary sensors, the multiple cameras or the IR thing that I don't know how thick they are. But anyway, no problem on the iMac. Plenty of room there, and so that should be the first place it appears is on their big desktops, because you've got more room, more power, and so that's what they should do.
Yeah, I have this slight fantasy that maybe the iMac Pro does have Face ID, and that's why it's not out yet. They were holding it back until the iPhone unveil with its Face ID. But I think in reality that's very unlikely.
The timing just doesn't seem to work out because everything having to do with Face ID is coming first on the 10, and that is everything that the company is focused on. The iMac Pro was started so long ago. It just seems like their flagship phone is going to blaze the path for this, and then it just doesn't work out timing wise. I feel like even the second generation iMac Pro that may be in the planning stages, even that one might not have Face ID incorporated. But I would love to be surprised too. I mean, it's not like any of us scrutinize the forehead of the iMac Pro model in that thing to look for tiny little, impossible to see, slightly differently colored black areas in the forehead to see if we could see an IR sensor.
Yeah, I think it's way more likely that Face ID does come to the Mac, but that it's in 3 years. Probably not soon.
Oh, I don't want to wait that long. Next year I want to see it in an iMac.
Maybe that can be in the Pro display. We have speculated on the show. They mentioned in the Mac Pro briefing last spring that they're working on a Mac Pro and also a new Pro display. We know nothing about that display except that they said it's going to exist. So we don't know what size it is. It could be 8K. We don't know. We have no idea what size it is, what resolution it is, what features will it have, when will it come out, what will it cost. We have no idea. One of the obvious questions is, what would make someone buy the Apple Pro display instead of the LG mediocrity box? And Face ID could be a great answer because it's going to cost more because it's going to be an Apple display. So if Apple's going to sell that, if LG's still selling theirs, let's assume this thing comes out next summer. Let's say the LG 5K display next summer is $1,000. I think at best it's going to be maybe $900, but it's probably going to be about $1,000 next summer. Apple comes out, let's say their display is 5K, it's probably going to be at least $1,500. So what can they do to help justify that cost? If LG's is going to be $1,000, now Apple's not going to be $1,000. So one of the things they can do that no one else can do is Face ID. They can build that in. That would be an incredible selling point that would make pretty much everyone at the high end choose that display over some other thing from somebody else. So that's something they can do. We don't know until that's the thing. Until we get actual information and hopefully actual product releases from the Mac Pro and this Pro display, there are so many unanswered questions that make it very hard to contextualize the iMac Pro and to decide whether to buy the iMac Pro or the other things.
So you said you'll be buying 13 iMac Pros.
Well, thanks to our sponsors this week, Betterment, Hover, and Away. And we will see you next week.
I'm pressing the space bar. I'm pressing the space bar. I am pressing the space bar. I'm pressing the space bar. And nothing is happening. This computer is about a year old, and it was very expensive. I had been waiting to upgrade for a long time, and now you're telling me that it would need extensive surgery for a speck of dust lodged beneath the butterfly. I found your instructions, they were not helpful. I bought this can of air, I feel like an idiot, 'cause I'm pressing the space bar. I'm pressing the space bar. I am pressing the space bar. I'm pressing the space bar. And nothing is happening. Oh, nothing is happening. I'm pressing the space bar and nothing's happening. Get me out of here.
So tell us what your little experiment was last week with the show. Not with your computer, but with the show.
Yeah, this didn't go so well. So, longtime listeners will remember that I had a bee in my bonnet, as Casey would probably say, about I was upset that Apple's MP3 decoding library did not properly seek VBR MP3s, and that podcasts could be way better if they could be VBR MP3s, because variable bitrate means that you can, for instance, the silences between all of our words that Overcast is helpfully shortening for you, for 70% of you. The silences between all of our words can use very few bits because there isn't much information there. The words can use a decent amount of bits, but not a massive amount because they don't need that much. And then the theme song that plays between the after show and the regular show can use like music bit rates. And all of that could be done at a total file size of not that much compared to a constant bitrate mediocre quality file, just because different parts of the file need different things, and some of them need more and some need less. So it makes sense to encode with variable bitrate. But the problem is if things that don't properly support variable bitrate, they basically read the file as if it's either the average bitrate of like the file size divided by the duration, or they read the very first MP3 frame, which is like the first few milliseconds of the file, and they assume that the whole file is whatever bitrate that first frame is. And so this causes a couple of problems. Oh, and also the way some of them would calculate duration is they would read that first frame, see what the bitrate is, look at the file size, and just divide it and say, all right, well, if the first frame is 32 kilobits and this is a 100 meg file, and this is going to be like, what would that be, like a 5 hour long file or something like that? The MP3 standard is very old. It doesn't provide a lot of niceties in this regard. So there's been some bad implementations over the years. However, VBR encoding has been around since literally the late 90s. So this is not a new thing to do, and it's extremely common for music files to be VBR encoded because it's a way to achieve very good quality without obscene file sizes. So this has been around for literally 20 years. Not everything supports it properly. The main problem that you see when it's not supported properly is either the duration is misreported because of what I said earlier, or seeking doesn't work properly, in the sense that you seek to a timestamp, and as far as the player is concerned, it is playing at that timestamp, but the content that you are hearing is not the content that's actually at the timestamp. You're hearing the wrong thing for the time if you seek, because the dumb way to seek is if you know the file size and the duration, you can say, all right, well, if the user seek to the 50% point in time in the duration, seek to the 50% byte in the file, and then just start playing from there. With a VBR file, though, you don't actually know that the 50% of the bytes through matches up to 50% of the time through, because the distribution of different bit rates could be different at different parts of the podcast. So when something doesn't support VBR properly, you have that issue where seeking to a timestamp does not actually play the correct timestamp. Well, we started getting a lot of reports from people on Android mostly this past week when I released the show, saying, hey, your chapter markers are all messed up and seek to the wrong timestamps in, insert name of Android podcast player. It wasn't too long before somebody, I think John probably, asked, did you by any chance encode the show in VBR this week? And the answer was yes, I did. So Apple added VBR seeking support finally in iOS 11 and in High Sierra. And now that iOS 11 has over 50% market share and nobody listens to podcasts on the Mac, sorry, Casey. So I figured this would be a safe time for me to try VBR, to just see like how many problems, are we going to hear from anybody who has problems, or is no one going to really notice or care? Because most of our listeners are on iOS. I bet a vast majority of them upgrade to the new OSs fairly soon. And since the global share of iOS 11 was over 50%, I figured, that's pretty good. And I knew it worked fine on Overcast and on any other iOS app that used the built-in iOS libraries. I figured Android is nerdy. Surely they've figured out a 20-year-old MP3 standard by now. Turns out that was wrong. It turns out that I don't know the great details on how MP3 decoding is done on Android, how many different libraries there are to do it, what versions there are out there, because I don't know anything about Android. But suffice to say, most of Android, or all of Android, in practice does not support VBR seeking of MP3s. And therefore, or at least the libraries that podcast makers use. I honestly, again, I don't know the details of all this. Short version is, they're not supported. So all of our Android listeners started bothering us and the app makers who make Android podcast apps, some of which are very mad at me right now. It was causing enough problems that I was convinced to put a CBR file back up, a constant bitrate file back up, and that this was not a good test after all. The failure rate was simply too high. So about a day after release, I switched the file out for a regular bitrate, lower quality, larger file. It turns out this was a failed experiment for VBR last week. I don't know when I will try it again. I think what this has shown me is that basically Android's not ready. iOS just got ready. Android is not ready. And because of the nature of Android, it's probably going to be a long time before podcast makers can safely ship VBR files without causing problems for people. So I'm guessing I'm probably not going to do VBR again for a very long time, possibly if ever. Because the other thing is, if I can, for instance, serve different files to different clients, like right now there's not a lot of infrastructure in place for that, things like our hosting and our website and things like that. But if I were to go through the complexity rabbit hole of adding something like that where I could serve different files to different clients, then I probably should stop using MP3 altogether for like the good one, and I should start making like an Opus file, because Opus is a way better codec than MP3, and I could get awesome quality with VBR naturally in something like a third of the file size. So I don't know if I'm ever going to actually be able to practically use VBR MP3s as a podcast again, but at least now that Apple supports it in their libraries, which means now that every iOS app will now support it, at least there's a chance. And I hope I can do it in the future, but it's probably going to be a long way off if ever.
You should just serve up the show as a HEVC video, but with no video. Like, it has all the features that you want from its audio stream, its variable bitrate and chapter markers and all that other stuff, and it may turn out to be playable on more platforms sooner than variable bitrate MP3, because it's not like VBR MP3 is a new standard. We're waiting for people to catch up. As you noted, it's 20 years old. So if they haven't done it now, what's their motivation? Whereas all of the HEVC and all those new containers is a new format, and I think most platforms will adopt it so people can watch 4K video or whatever on it. Although what is the competing one? What is the Google one that they like? Is it VP9?
Yeah, one of the VPs.
Yeah. Well, anyway, you still probably serve two different files, two different things. Anyway, next time, just, do the experiment in top 4 is all I'm saying. I can't hear about pumpkin spice food. I'm so angry. They'll get over it. They'll be fine.
Wow. It's escalated quickly.
It's not as important as hearing us complain for the umpteenth time about the MacBook Pro keyboard and the Mac Pro. I mean, let's get priority straight here. Although I have to say, seeing the picture of all that food that you bought, like, I try not to do the math. Like, I feel like you're running the show at a loss based on how many hundreds of dollars worth of crap food you buy for each episode and then, give away or throw away. It doesn't seem to make economic sense, and it's giving you tummy aches.
Yeah, fortunately, pumpkin spice garbage food from discount retail stores is not very expensive. But yeah, that definitely was probably...
That was a lot of food.
Yeah.
It was a lot of food.
Well, it's big boxes. I mean, it's crap food. There's not a lot in there.
Did you try it all other than the ones that you were too afraid to? Like, did you actually open every box and consider?
Yeah, there were a few that we cut from this show. Like there was a bag of popcorn. There were a few that we cut just because it wasn't interesting, and we recorded something like an hour and 45 minutes worth. It was
two sessions, right?
Yeah,
because of upset tummies,
and we ran out of time. Like the first session we had to fit in the school day because we were doing it during the day, and it was time to go pick up Adam at the bus. We had to stop. We had way too much food. So yeah, that was. There was a lot of editing there.
We'll put a link in the show notes. This is one of Marco's other podcasts, and it's very different from ATP, and it's a lot of fun. And if you're interested in it, you'll be able to link to it. In this episode, they tasted a bunch of pumpkin spice food. I don't know why, is what they do. And then the premise of the show is that they rank them, but it's a farce. So anyway, check out the show. Can I have this to be tied for my number 2?
I have 45 honorable mentions.
Right, yeah. No, I give them the honorable mentions just once they get into the 4 that they can't actually pick 4. Marco had a new twist this time because it was like, this would be my number 2, except it's not my number 2 because I'm weird about things. So, he had an alternate number 2 and 3 after he'd gotten up to his number 1 and he'd done the other ones, and he's saying this would actually be my number 2, and there was some kind of explanation that made sense in his mind, but it didn't actually make any sense as to why his number 2 was not even in the top 4.
Yeah, that's
truly mind-boggling.
It made sense in my head.
He'd already had lots of pumpkin beer at that point, so we didn't really know.
Not honestly. I had 3 sips of pumpkin beer because one of them I didn't like very much, and the other one I didn't have time to drink. So I was high on pumpkin spice donuts and cream cheese and all sorts of weird stuff.
I like how the pumpkin spice donut holes that barely had any flavor. It's like you were munching on those anyway. Because like, you know what, donuts.
Yeah, they're good.
Like, so they're not pumpkin spicy. They don't even make my honorable mentions, but donuts.
You can have donut holes in pretty much any flavor, and they're going to be amazing, and you're going to want more of them.
They're so small.
Yes,
They barely count.
they feel free.
That's what we're missing on this show. How come we don't get snacks? What the hell?
I know, right?
You got toasters for a while.
Yeah, but I had to supply my own food, and it was like toast. I didn't have any pumpkin butter to put on it.